Hello and welcome to 6th part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Became a Street Fighter Part 4. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
It was down to the semi-finals because Naruto thought his two fights in the first round and quarter-finals were both a waste of time. He won without even using a copy. The second opponent Batsu faced in the quarter-finals was much easier to beat than Balrog. This was especially true since Balrog thought Batsu would be easy to beat because he was hurt. He quickly got rid of the jerk and laid back down on the ground in the row of seats with his friends. Sakura's opponent in the quarter-finals was kicked out of the tournament very badly when she found out that he was making her throw high kicks so he could look up her skirt. Really, that damn uniform she wore made grown men act like pigs for some reason. After that, she hit him in the face with her fist and then the barricade until he screamed for her to stop, which she did reluctantly. Sakura would fight Batsu in the next round, and Naruto would fight his own opponent for the chance to face a friend in the finals. There was no shirt on Batsu as he sat with Ishizaki re-taping his ribs at Karen's request. Is 5 million yen really worth this? He asked out loud. The second you punch me in the stomach, Sakura, I'm going to be puking blood. With that image stuck in her mind, Sakura didn't want to go to the next round. I don't want to fight you if you're hurt, Batsu. But you're not going to drop out either, are you? Hell no. That's what Sakura said as she ran her hand through her short brown hair and frowned. Would you hate me if? That was the last thing Batsu said before she could ask the question. I won't be mad if you fight me like you'd fight anyone else. He wouldn't care, of course. There were fights all over the place. What did she need to do? It was clear that he wasn't going to lay down for her out there either. Thanks a lot, he told her as Karen's big butler finished heavily taping his ribs back up. Ishizaki nodded and then went back to his seat. Batsu didn't put his shirt back on. Instead, he tied it around his waist. Except for one guy. Everyone left in the tournament were his friends. They all knew he was hurt and would need to be able to move around as much as possible. Don't hide it. Even though they told her not to worry, Sakura was still a little worried. It would have been okay to fight if Batsu was healthy. It was clear that he wasn't healthy because of the thick layer of tape that went around his middle. Thought Batsu was having a hard time sitting down because his ribs were hurt. Does anyone have a marker? He asked. Because I think I want to draw a bullseye on my stomach just to be funny for the next round. In the arena lobby with Naruto, I'm sorry, I had to be dragged out of bed at the crack of dawn this morning. There's no way you were done with your morning workouts in time to get here. Naruto begged over the phone. As he spoke, he shook his head wildly up and down the hall, making people look at him strangely. Come on, you can't really be that mad, can you, Ibuki? You're damn right, I'm mad, you jerk, Ibuki yelled over the phone, making Naruto take the phone away from his ear. I've always wanted to see Tokyo, and you and Sakura-chan just skipped school without telling anyone? No warning at all to anyone. I wanted to go too. She ended, and Naruto thought he could see the pout on her face from where he was. Naruto finally stopped moving and leaned against a wall with a grin on his face. And really, we've been standing in line and just fighting. You would have been bored unless you took the day off from us. Sigh, I guess they're always next time. I've got to go. I'm almost close to getting back to my village and I can't let them see the phone. At least bring me something back and I'll see you guys in school on Monday. Don't get yourself put into the hospital, alright? Naruto put down his phone when he heard Ibuki end the call. He sighed and said, I wouldn't go anyway because I hate hospitals. He then thought about the semi-finals of the tournament. As expected, there weren't many interesting people here. Balrog stood out, and his win over the Great Oni in the preliminary round was the only other example he could think of. This time in the finals, I'm going to fight either Sakura-chan or Batsu for real, he said. He found it a little exciting to fight his friends when this time there was something at stake, not just a fight this time. Naruto turned his head and looked at Karen as she walked down the hall towards him. She was being proper as usual and ignoring the people around her until she stood in front of him. You still have to win your semi-final bout before you can think about beating one of your friends, he told her. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in shame and said, well, I'm excited. I haven't been this excited to fight in a long time. I want to see what my friends have really got. Karen pointed a stern finger right at Naruto and said, "Like I said before, you should worry about your semifinal match first and foremost. Your opponent is very dangerous, and he got a bye through the quarterfinals because the winner of the first round match that would have faced him pulled out because of injury. He's also fresher than you." Naruto grabbed Karen's hand to take it off his face and flexed his other arm at her. "Hey, you're crazy if you think I'll get tired just like that. Don't worry," he said. She said, "You didn't see his first round match because you ran off to get Batsu medical supplies after winning your own fight." Karen's brown eyes showed worry that was hard to miss. Right away, though, she shut it down and asked, "What do you know about professional wrestling?" Naruto brought up the story of the Shoei Oni guy and said, "I beat that guy in the preliminary round." But did that question mean that the next wrestler he would face was someone else? If Karen brought it up, "So I'm fighting a wrestler again?" It had to be. "You will be fighting the best wrestler in Russia," Karen told him with a hollow look in her eyes. "A national hero and a walking monster of a man." Karen sighed and spoke again. This time it looked like it was hard for her. "Naruto-san, you have my express permission to surrender before the next round." Naruto's face lit up with shock. Surrender? Are you kidding me? I haven't even seen the guy yet and you're telling me you want me to just quit? Karen quickly ran her hand through her curls and put them behind her shoulders. "It would be better if you did. I don't need to see my investment destroyed by some huge brute just for this tournament. There will be better chances in the future to show how strong and skilled you are. You can leave without losing anything." Naruto quickly waved his hands in front of him to stop Karen's reasoning. "So you can send me to fight a sumo wrestler in a bathhouse, but I can't fight this Russian guy? What's with the big change of heart?" "Like I said," Karen said, looking down at Naruto's grip on her wrist as she took it off with her other hand, "you didn't see his first round match." Background. First round, ow, Batsu said while still lying on the floor in front of the row of chairs where everyone else was sitting. "Where's Naruto? Hasn't he been to Tokyo enough times to know where the closest medical supply store is?" Instead of being worried about that, Karen crossed her arms over her chest as one of the next fighters walked into the ring. If he is a smart fighter, he should go back as soon as possible to watch the rest of his opponents that he may end up facing, she said. "He'll be back," Sakura said with full trust. Naruto didn't send one of his clones because they tend to kind of go off and do dumb things when he gives them money to buy things like this. They'll spend it on themselves, and Naruto doesn't like technically stealing since when his clones dispel the money the clone had in their pocket will dispel too. With a bored look in her eyes, Karen looked back down at the ring and said, well, you certainly know quite a bit about my employee." Sakura gave it a shrug because she didn't think it was important. Since they had been close for more than 3 years, she knew that much about him. "Yeah. He was my best friend first, not your worker. Of course I know more about him than you. You don't even consider yourself a friend of his." Karen bit the inside of her lip because she wanted to say something and argue that point, but her pride was getting in the way. They had to talk about it alone for Naruto to get her to say it. There was no way she was going to say they were friends without being asked first. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the last first round match of the evening. Introducing first from Seoul, South Korea, he stands 6 feet 1 inch, and weighs in at 184 pounds, Chan Du-san. A man in a white taekwondo uniform and a long ponytail raised his arm to acknowledge the announcer calling his name. He stood in front of a man who was hunched over and keeping his head down, hiding his whole body with a red cape. His opponent, straight from his training in Siberia, he stands 7 feet tall and weighs in at 254 pounds. This is the Red Cyclone of Russia, Zangief. The man took off the red cape that was covering his body, letting everyone see his whole body. He had a goatee or beard and a big patch of hair on his chest. His brown hair was cut into a high hair. He had many scars on his body and wore red wrestling tights, red boots, and red wristbands. His waist was adorned with a yellow studded belt. In general, he made a very scary picture. Chan, on the other hand, moved right up to Zangief and hit him with a jumping axe kick that Zangief blocked and then threw away. The quick taekwondo fighter got back up, though, and went right back at Zangief, kicking the big Russian wrestler in the body. One of the kicks did get through, though, and Zangief pulled him in for a punch that completely knocked him out. Seeing this as his chance, Zangief grabbed his opponent around the waist and turned him over. He then jumped at least 10 feet into the air, spun around, and slammed Chan headfirst into the ground while sitting down. The crowd roared with joy as Zangief threw Chan's lifeless body to the ground and stood up, raising his arms in the air to thank the sky and shout loudly for his win. Because Chan wasn't moving, it was clear that he won. And Zangief simply overwhelms Chan with his massive signature spinning piledriver. One move, ladies and gentlemen, that's all it took. We can only hope that Chan is alright. But advancing to the next round of fights, the Red Cyclone, Zangief. Expect nothing less from the most powerful man in Russia. The crowd cheered for Zangief, and he flexed to them. The EMTs quickly took Chan out of the arena on a stretcher. Quit the flashback. Chan Do-san was not okay, Karen said, putting her hand on the back of Naruto's neck where she could feel his vertebrae. Even now, doctors have said that he is paralyzed. An attack like that on a concrete floor had no give. I am not willing to take that kind of risk with you. For a moment, Naruto took Karen's hand off the back of his neck and held it. He then patted the back of her hand a few times and said, I'm not going to get paralyzed, Karen. He had been thrown off a cliff and hit rocks headfirst before and survived. Besides that, Zangief had to grab him first and say, don't you worry one bit, boss lady. He then realized something wasn't right and asked, where's Shibazaki? Usually, when I try to touch you, he has a heart attack at me. I sent him to the vendor area to ask them to use their equipment to feed me. I'm not that hungry, but I did need to find a moment to talk to you alone. This was the easiest way to make sure of that, Karen said with a smirk. Naruto laughed and said, I've got to be rubbing off on you somehow, because that seems like a mate kind of move. He leaned back a little so that their faces wouldn't touch as Karen leaned in close to him. Some people were leaving the halls because they didn't want to miss the semifinals, leaving Naruto and Karen more and more alone. You say that as if you've taught me how to be sneaky. That couldn't be further from the truth. I was sneaky before you and I even met, Karen said in a whisper. Naruto whispered back, I already knew that. He felt a little awkward being so close to her at the moment. He might have been a little startled by how close they were if he wasn't so scared of how much evil he was sure was kept in Karen's female body. If you're going to kiss me for good luck, you should just go ahead and do it now, he said. Karen gave Naruto a light laugh and then stepped back. She put her hands sensuously on her hips and said, I do not kiss commoners, Naruto-san. Keep that dream though. It was more like a nightmare, but he didn't want to say that out loud because that would hurt their relationship. Very good. I found you fairly easily. When Naruto and Karen turned around, they saw a man with a lot of beautiful women following him around. Karen had to agree that the man was very attractive. It was clear that he was not a commoner because of his suit and his long, brown hair that was pulled back into a neat ponytail. As he walked up, Karen asked, Is there any way we can help you? Do you have any business with us? Now that I've seen him up close, he's rather unattractive, the man said with a grumpy look. What are those marks on his face? He looks like a total thug. He then turned his attention to Karen, who was clearly beautiful and the person he wanted to talk to. It didn't matter if the message got out. I have business with the young man here. I wish to offer him a job of sorts. I simply need to see more of what he is capable of in order to finalize whether or not I will require his services. And you are? Karen asked, giving the man a small raised eyebrow because he hadn't introduced himself. Ah, of course, the man said with a broad bow that made the women who were with him swoon with awe. He then lifted his head and smiled at Karen. You may call me Vega. You are a very beautiful young woman, Kanzuki Dono. Your family name goes back to the nobles in Spain. Hearing her name mentioned in a formal setting by a man who knew how to act in a foreign country made Karen bow back and stand up. You have a problem you'd like to bring up with Naruto-san? Is this true? It pays, right? She asked, thinking it was a nice idea to try to get Naruto a good deal. Naruto was save money for some reason, and this could help a lot with that if the man paid well. The Vega man replied with a smile, of course. I can promise you that he will be paid very well for his help. Karen gave Naruto a nod and then asked, What do you think, Na? Naruto hadn't said a word since Vega arrived, so she stopped asking when she saw the hard, suspicious look in his eyes as he looked at Vega. Naruto-san. It didn't make Naruto look away from Vega. He looked into the man's eyes as if he were trying to find something. He must have found it because he narrowed his eyes and moved slightly in front of Karen in a protective way, saying, I don't want to hear your offer. I'm not interested. Avatar Vega asked, are you sure? But Naruto became more angry at this second offer. He could see the darkness behind Vega's eyes, which seemed innocent. The boy is very smart. I guess he has to have some good qualities to make up for how bad he looks, he thought. There's so much desire in his eyes, Naruto thought. Naruto could feel Vega's strong desire to kill him as soon as she got a good look at his face. He had felt worse before, even though it was thick. It was clear that this man had killed many people, though. Naruto said, I'm sure. I don't need to hear anything else. Karen pays me more than enough. I'm not looking for someone else to work for right now. Their clean hands made Naruto think of the blood on his hands. He gave a stiff nod, as if he understood, and then turned around and walked away, with the women following him. I see. Well, thank you for your time, Kanzuki Dono, Uzumaki-san. His hard-soled shoes didn't make a sound as he walked. That was crazy. He was skilled. Why in the world did he need Naruto's help? He looked like he could handle things on his own. Why did you turn down that man so quickly? Karen asked him vehemently as Vega went back to the main arena. Her foot was tapping the floor impatiently, waiting for him to answer. I could see that he had a lot of connections. He also had a lot of money and would have paid you a lot of money. Isn't that your goal? Naruto glared down the hall at Vega, who had long since left. I'm not taking anyone's blood money, he said. That guy. He had the eyes and the body language of a killer. Naruto could tell the difference between people in Japan and Konohagakure by the way they walked. People who moved with even a modicum of combat etiquette were rare to see, let alone someone who moved like an assassin. Every move he made looked like it could have turned into a deadly attack. No matter what he wanted me to do, it wasn't worth it, she said. Karen asked Naruto, what about your goal? She was trying to get Naruto to understand that she wanted him to be financially stable for whatever reason. How is turning down a lucrative opportunity going to help you? It wasn't going anywhere for Naruto. That guy's eyes, I don't like him. There's something really wrong with him beyond that pretty boy face of his. I don't work for people I don't like. He then answered Karen's question in silence. Yes, that means I kind of like you. You're not a bad person at all. That's nice of you. That's nice, but from Karen's point of view, that wasn't really the point of the talk. He didn't like or trust anything about Vega, that's all. As his own agent, he could find him work, but he still asked, it looks like you need my money to help you, so why don't you just tell me what it is? There's no need to make this happen again by accident. What are you looking for? I can't tell you. And why not? Because you'd never believe me, no one would. And I don't need anyone thinking I'm crazy. He hadn't even told his best friend Sakura about this, right? If that were the case, Karen knew that being bossy wouldn't get him to say it. It was true that Naruto was strange in ways that went beyond his fighting skills. Before Karen sighed and brushed it off, Naruto-san asked, honestly, you say I need to be open. Well, what about yourself, Naruto-san? There isn't much that you could say to me at this point that would cause too much of a stir with me. I am very level-headed, she said. Just know that whenever you wish to bear your secret ambition to me, I will lend you an ear. It sounded like she was bragging, but there was more to her words. Why would you care? Naruto asked, genuinely interested in what she was up to. Who knows? It might be very interesting, just like I think you are. That was a really vague answer. Shibazaki should be done making my meal soon, Naruto asked Karen. If he wanted such a vague answer, he wouldn't have asked the question in the first place. Naruto did nothing but stare at her as she walked back down the hallway to get to the right entrance to the arena. He then decided to just follow her. It would be pointless and confusing for him to think about what was going on in the mind of a rich girl. He had a fight to get ready for, and his friends were getting ready for their own fight right away. After a few minutes, main arena, Sakura stood in the middle of the ring, looking nervous. She was facing off against Batsu, who looked calm, but his uniform top was still tied around his waist, showing the bandages on his torso. He made a small scowl on his face when he saw that Sakura's body language showed that she was nervous. Are you still on about me fighting hurt? She asked. I'm fine with it, mostly. So just get over it, Batsu replied. They said, I don't fight to hurt people, I just want to win. Sakura replied. I can't win without making your wounds worse. Way worse. Batsu stood ready with his fists clenched and said, then just do it and stop whining about it. I'm not going to take it easy on you. If you're not going to quit, you'd better put me down hard and quickly. The first semifinal match involves two high school students from Alhora City and they seem to know each other quite well. How interesting. It is Kasagano Sakura against Ichimonji Batsu. Winner heads to the final round. Let's see who's the strongest student. And Batsu said, if you don't attack me, I'll attack you. He held out his left fist and hit it with his right fist as if he were lighting a match. Kaiden Guts Bullet. He then launched his special key attack at Sakura, making her dodge it and starting the real battle while he tried to close the gap by using the last attack as a feint to get closer. Still, Sakura didn't want to use her own special attack to fight back. This actually made it possible for Batsu, who was moving much more slowly because of his injury, to get close to her and start trading blows with her. Sakura wasn't going back against Batsu's crazy swinging kicks, but they didn't touch her either. It was possible for her to get around him, but when she got past the guard of someone bigger than her, her first thought was to hit them hard. Batsu took advantage of her unwillingness to fight back by calling out, Mikazuki Kero Crescent Moon Kick. Sakura felt pain in her torso as Batsu kicked her hard, sending her tumbling and rolling back over the floor. Because Batsu had to fully extend his body for the move to work, he fell to his knees and grabbed his stomach. Stop fighting sloppy Sakura, he yelled. I can still beat you to a pulp for damn it. When Sakura got back up after being hit so hard, she saw Batsu on his knees. This made her heart race. Right then, she started to lose her will to fight back again. Anything that made an opponent, especially someone close to him, feel sorry for him made Batsu very angry, so he quickly got back up and went back into his fighting stance. Stop being a coward. Naruto says you're good. He yelled, charging at her again. She yelled, Hadoken Surge Fist, and fired a wild, fast-flashing Hadoken at Batsu, hoping that the weak but quick attack would knock him out without doing too much damage. But Batsu just jumped over it and made her pay for her mistake. Ryasekero Falling Star Kick. After falling from the sky, Batsu hit Sakura with another hard kick that was so strong that it made friction sparks as she flew backwards. The crowd let out a collective, "Ooh," as her body hit the strong wall that separated them from the fighting area. If you don't fight back, you'll be the one who gets hurt. In the rows, shuddering, Naruto heard Sakura's body hitting the barrier and said, "Come on Sakura-chan. Even I know that when you've hurt someone you've got to finish the job." He said this quietly from his seat next to Karen. Because Shibazaki wasn't there before, her butlers ended up sitting on her right side while she held Naruto to her left, which made Shibazaki very unhappy. Though they were focused on the fight, they seemed to be getting along great. She should be more aggressive than this. When we fought, she was sharper. Her form was very dirty, but this is nothing like that. It looks like she doesn't even want to hit him, he said. She's too scared she'll hurt him worse. That's stupid, Karen bluntly said, seeing Naruto's plan as a reason to make her rival look worse. If he was okay, she'd be trying to beat him to a pulp. The only thing that's changed is that the job is now halfway done. She's too soft to win a real fight. Even though Naruto wanted to protect Sakura's good nature, there was a time and a place for that. If Batsu was going to fight, she should have burned him alive. Like Batsu, Naruto wanted to keep fighting. Sakura-chan, if you lose without fighting him back, I'm gonna make your life a living hell when we get home. You can count on that, Dadbao. In the ring, Kano vs Sakura, Naruto's voice was very clear, and nothing could block it out when he wanted someone to hear him. Naruto's threat was clear to Sakura, who knew he would never hurt her. However, she knew that hell wasn't the kind of hell he could bring her. He knew all of her daily plans and all the places she could hide to try to avoid him, so the embarrassing prank booby traps would be unbearable. Take him seriously, damn it. Naruto shouted at her again, you're disrespecting Batsu like this. He wants your best, he doesn't want you to pity him. How would you feel if that was you? She would be mad. If she was still able to stand and determined to fight, and her opponent wouldn't even look at her, she would hurt him badly to show him what a fool he was for thinking she wasn't strong enough. It looked like Batsu agreed with her because he attacked her quite badly while her guard was down. Okay Batsu, Sakura said out loud as she got back up and walked past the barricade she had hit. No more holding back. If this is what you want, this is what you'll get. When Batsu took his hands off of his hurt ribs to get back into a fighting stance, he laughed and said, finally. This way when I beat you I can say I'm that much better than you. Even though he wasn't feeling well, he was still sure in his mind that he could win. It was enough for him to put together a good set of moves. His body was strong enough to handle the pain that a good chain of attacks would cause. Sakura let out a wild Hadoken surge fist. She gave up power and control to go for speed and range, but this time she missed wide. But it let her get close enough to fight hand to hand. She started with a low front sweep that Batsu blocked by lifting his leg up. Sakura then hit him with a spinning backfist that he dove, but it hurt his ribs. Sakura's spinning combo wasn't over yet, though, as she spun through a third time to land a solid low kick that hit him in the right side, even though he had his guard up to protect himself. When Batsu pushed her leg away and stood up straight, he let out a small grunt of pain. He then blocked a barrage of punches from Sakura, pushed her back, and tried to land a hard, rushing uppercut that missed, which hurt his body a lot because he had to fully extend himself to make the move work. This time, Sakura didn't feel sorry for him. Instead of trying to avoid a fight, she gave him a sidekick to the body, hitting him where it hurt the most. Batsu fell backwards and his knees shook. He fought hard to keep them from giving out. He asked Sakura to be tough on him, so he couldn't say anything bad about it. Batsu was hit right in the ribs by Sakura's direct, straight punch, which made her yell, "Ouch!" She tried to pull her hand away, but she couldn't. She looked at Batsu's face and saw that he was painfully smirking at her. It was bound to be a rib attack. If that stupid jerk thought they were a real fighter, they would have jumped at that big white taped opening every chance they got. It was impossible to avoid. He could only get ready for the fight. "All I do is get into fights where I'm guaranteed to get the crap beat out of me," he said, tightening his grip on Sakura's arm and lifting his leg to give her a big boot to the face that knocked her down and away. "Do you really think I don't know how to take a punch like that?" After Batsu kicked her off, Sakura lay down on the ground for a moment and held the shoulder of the arm he had been holding. She almost felt like her shoulder was out of place, but she could still move it, so that wasn't the case. After that, she felt lucky to be awake because she had seen Batsu throw a racing motorcycle like a shot put before, and the kick to her head wasn't strong enough because he was hurt. That was the only reason she could think of why that clutch counterattack didn't knock her out. She stood up and growled to herself as she charged at Batsu again and attacked with Shunpukyaku twirling gale kick. Sakura's jumping spin kick just bounced off of Batsu's guard, letting her drift into the air like a pinwheel as she flew over his head. She then hit him in the face with a falling punch that went through and hit him hard. When the bullet hit Batsu in the head, it snapped down into the side, spraying blood onto the ground. He turned around and tried to hit back with a haymaker, but Sakura dove under it. "Fuck," Batsu thought to himself as Sakura crouched under his fist and arm. "I overextended. I was too crazy." Sakura yelled, "This should fix you," and then hit Batsu in the ribs with two low spinning kicks. A third kick, a high front kick to the face, knocked him out of the ring before he could fully double over and hold his torso. As Sakura flipped over him, she hit him with a two-handed smash that knocked him to the ground. She then landed perfectly with a double stomp right on Batsu's ribs again, screaming, "Haru Ranman turbulent pride of spring." "Ah!" Batsu yelled out loud, and Sakura pushed herself all the way into his torso. He passed out from pain, lying on the ground spread eagle and not moving. While crouching on Batsu's body, Sakura let out a tired sigh and said to the unconscious young man, "I really didn't want to break out my new special combination on you, but you just wouldn't go down." She then stood up. That's it for that one, everyone. The winner of the match, and proceeding to the final round of the tournament, Kasagano Sakura. Sakura held up one hand in victory and smoothed out her dress. She then looked back at Batsu with sadness as the EMTs checked him out and put him on a stretcher. "He's going to be okay, isn't he?" she asked as she walked with the doctors for a while. "You broke one of his ribs, but as far as we can tell, nothing has ruptured. He's not bleeding internally from his mouth," the main doctor among them said. "We need to take him to the hospital," and Sakura stopped at a pair of ground-level double doors that led to the back of the arena, staring at the doors in shock. "Oh no," Sakura said, her feet touching the ground. She didn't want this. She didn't mean to hurt a friend, so she took one to the hospital. This is how rule-free full-contact fighting worked. When she turned around, she saw that Naruto had also rushed through the stands to see Batsu off. She ran over to him and gave him a tight hug, telling him, "Naruto, I'm sorry I hurt him." Just hoping she wouldn't start crying on him, Naruto said, I know. He didn't need to worry about how to comfort a girl who was crying, and he didn't know how to do it. He knew he couldn't calm her down by then if she lost, so he told her, look, Batsu knew what he was doing when he came down for this round. You didn't do anything wrong. You went after the weak spot. That's how you win a fight. It's okay, Sakura-chan. She knew that, for sure. No matter what, it didn't sit well with her. I know how to win a fight. I don't want to hurt my friends though, Sakura pouted, but he couldn't see her because her head was buried in his shoulder and chest. Batsu's going to be fine. He's a tough bastard, Naruto said, patting her on the back. Now come on. Stop being all emotional and girly. My fight's next and I can't be all full of estrogen and touchy feelings when I'm trying to crack skulls. As Sakura pulled away from Naruto, she smacked him in the chest with a small smile. I'm girly because I'm a girl, stupid, she said, sighing a little. Thanks for that though. So you won't be too angry when I beat you, will you? Karen stood there with her hands on her hips, and Naruto and Sakura both turned around to see her. Yes, Karen-san? We were talking. Is that what she calls it? While you two were having a moment, Naruto-san's opponent entered the ring. Karen shut the thought out of her mind with a smirk. So if you're done holding him up with your little near breakdown. She trailed off before adding, unless you want to cry on his shoulder some more, little girl. The electricity between their eyes at that point was so close that he thought he could see it. Naruto moaned and then walked straight to the ring. Don't beat each other up please, he said as he walked back to the barrier and hopped over it to get into the ring. He wasn't going to stand there and stop a fight between two girls who could knock him out right before the match for getting in the way. Now it's time for the second semifinal match of the evening. It's the 16-year-old self-professed ninja, the part-time soldier with a chip on his shoulder, Uzumaki Naruto. And he's taking on Russia's greatest athlete, the most dangerous grappler on the face of the planet, Zangief. This is a real David versus Goliath matchup. I'll let you go ahead and guess who's who. It had been a while since Naruto had to look someone straight in the eye to see their face. Zangief was at least twice as tall and more than twice as wide as him. I didn't know you could get muscles there, he said, almost in awe of his opponent's size. He was so small that Naruto said, well, whatever. After getting the chance to get into the ring with the best ninja in the world and getting kicked in the ass, I'll give you the chance to shake my hand. Naruto was trying to be brave to get himself in the right frame of mind to fight. Let's see what you've got to offer, little one, Zangief said with a laugh as he ruffled Naruto's hair. Naruto almost broke his neck because his arms were so strong. Zangief's grip tightened, and Naruto remembered that Zangief was a wrestler and that this was not good. The strong Russian picked Naruto up and slapped his head like a basketball. But Naruto wrapped his arms and legs around his arm like a leech and said, what are you doing? Let go. When Zangief tried to shake Naruto off for a throw or slam, Naruto yelled back, no. Screw off, and attached himself to him with chakra. Zangief got mad and lifted his arm to slam it into the ground, Naruto included. That was enough to make Naruto let go. He swung himself around Zangief's arm like a metal bar and drop-kicked him in the face before flipping away and getting some distance. I have to stay fast or this guy will kill me if he can grab me, Naruto said. With a loud yell, Zangief jumped into the air and hit Naruto with a dropkick that Naruto dodged. He kicked this guy in the head earlier and felt like he had just kicked a log. Cage Bunshin no Jutsu Shadow Clone Jutsu. 12 Naruto clones appeared out of smoke and dove at Zangief to pin him down. They might as well have been ragdolls, though, because Zangief threw them into each other and kicked them off when they tried to grab his legs. Are you kidding me? Tell me I'm not seeing double, or dozen in this case. Uzumaki Naruto just cloned himself on command. Is he even human? Zangief's core was as strong as iron, and he grabbed Naruto's leg after its heel hit him. This gave Naruto time to land a flipping axe kick. Naruto felt pressure on the top of his kneecap and knew that he was almost breaking his leg. Naruto made more clones, and they were quick to defend their creator. They beat Zangief up and pulled on his arms to free Naruto before something bad happened. When Naruto was hit and bothered by the clones over and over again, some of them freed him and dragged him away. In a fit of anger, Zangief stood up and threw 2 Cage Bunshin at the ground, one in each hand. He then picked up another one and headbutted it into oblivion, and when it tried to attack, he punched it in the face and turned it into smoke. After killing all of his attackers, He glared at Naruto and his 7 remaining clones while a throbbing vein of anger in his forehead sent blood rushing to the surface. People around the clones were wary of each other, but they all had Naruto's determination to fight. They knew for sure one way to stop a man from fighting, and since Zangief already looked like he had blood leaking from a vein in his head, it probably wouldn't even take this much to finish the job. Naruto yelled, "Let's finish this," as his clones surrounded Zangief like wild animals, making hand seals. No man alive can stand up to this move. Harem no jutsu, harem jutsu. Smoke came and went, revealing that Naruto and his clones had been replaced by several beautiful blonde women who were severely lacking clothing. "Hello Zangief-sama." They all cried as they hung all over the man. In the rows, as soon as Honda saw what was below in the ring, he had to cover his nose so that blood wouldn't fly out of it. What on earth? How in the world does he call that a technique? He asked himself. He hoped no one saw him, but he felt safe because most of the other guys were either cheering wildly or hurting physically. She looked down at the ring where her friend was making a fool of himself and said, "I might kill him." He had never used that world-beating technique in front of her, which was lucky for him. "I might really kill him this time. I don't think I can hit him enough to make him realize how bad this is," she said. Karen clenched her teeth when she saw the harem jutsu and said, "I'm sure there is a proper number somewhere." She added, "A very high number." Was it wrong of her to think about taking Naruto's pay away for what he did? Naruto versus Zangief in the ring. Sadly, Naruto thought that having almost a dozen naked women hanging off of Zangief would make him behave better, but it didn't work. Zangief didn't turn red in the face and spit most of his blood out of his nose like many others had done before him. Instead, he twisted his face in anger and yelled, "Raw! Double lariat!" He then quickly spun around and hit the transformed clones and the original hard with clotheslines and spinning backfists, asking, "What kind of fighting technique is that? Turning yourself into a whore?" He then spat hatefully on the ground and ran at Naruto, who was sitting up. "What are you, gay?" Naruto yelled from behind, where Zangief's pole-like arms had hit him, causing blood to flow from his nose. Who just rolled their eyes at that? The man charging at him was clear in his sight, so he did a few more hand seals before spitting out Chakra Spitfire as his next attack. Banishing flat. Zangief yelled, and his right hand lit up green. He quickly slapped Naruto's Spitfire attack away, but that didn't stop him from charging. By the time Naruto got back up, Zangief had already reached him. Naruto was shocked and yelled, "He just slapped it away. It was wrong for someone to just throw his jutsu away like it was a baseball. Someone should have done something. What was that green stuff? How is Zangief?" But Naruto let out a sharp breath when Zangief slammed a knee into his stomach. As Zangief slammed Naruto head, neck, and back first onto the ground after flipping him over onto his shoulders, he yelled to the crowd, "Flying powerbomb. This is what real fighting is all about," as he stood on Naruto's chest with one foot and lifted his arm in the air in victory. Not cheap light tricks or misdirection. Crush your opponent and show your superiority with no shadow of a doubt to the outcome. Naruto was in so much pain from being powerbombed on the concrete that he almost couldn't feel himself move for a while. But once he could move his limbs again, he wasn't going to let that jerk step on him like he was a bug. Rasengan Spiraling Sphere. Naruto yelled as he grabbed Zangief's boot with one hand and made a blue sphere of fast-moving energy with the other. When Naruto slammed the Rasengan into the side of Zangief's knee, he let out a terrible howl of pain. The force of the blow made Zangief do a full flip through the air 3 times very quickly before landing on his face on the concrete floor. Naruto quickly crawled and then stood up to run away when the time was right. When he turned around, Zangief was looking at him from the ground, his eyes almost bulging out of his head in pain or anger as he rolled over and sat up, his right leg clearly dislocated at the knee. Naruto thought to himself, "That's got to be it." He spat out his own blood and looked at the downed Zangief as if to tell it to give up. Zangief carefully lined up his own leg and slammed his hands against both sides of it to audibly pop it back into place. Naruto had to fight the urge to gulp. "Fuck," he thought as he saw Zangief start to stand back up. "Fine. I'll just knock you out now then." He made 5 clones that surrounded Zangief again as he stood up. They all tried to kick him up, but it was like trying to kick a small car off the ground. Is he really that strong? Another crazy arm attack called Spinning lariat. Knocked out Zangief's clones, but Naruto dove and quickly hit Zangief in the ribs with a hard uppercut that made him grunt. The shot was technically sound. You punch like a girl. Hurt, but it wasn't enough. That wasn't really an insult, especially since Naruto knew those girls, but it was still an insult, and he didn't take it lying down. He then stomped and kicked at the knee that he knew he had just dislocated. An appropriate answer. Zangief got down on one knee and screamed in pain again. He then growled and grabbed Naruto by the neck with both hands. The huge Russian warrior picked Naruto up off the ground and started squeezing him with his bare hands. "Close your eyes and go to sleep, little one," he said. Zangief's reach was scary, and Naruto could barely touch his body with the tips of his toes as he tried in vain to pull Zangief's hands off of his throat. "He's so strong," Naruto thought to himself. "It looks like the grip of Super Bushy Brows Sensei." Naruto couldn't even make noises like choking or coughing because the blood pressure in his head was making the whites of his eyes turn red. His blood vessels were under a lot of stress because of the high blood pressure. What he was about to do wasn't right in a fighting tournament, but he also didn't want to be strangled in front of a bunch of angry people. It got harder for Naruto to see as he stopped trying to free Zangief from his grip. He reached into his supply pouch and pulled out 2 kunai. He then buried them deep into Zangief's legs. Zangief had to drop Naruto to the ground because the black iron blades were stabbing him. He fell backwards in shock and pain, roaring as he tried to get the weapons out of his hands. Angry, he threw them to the ground and stomped on Naruto, who was on his hands and knees wheezing and choking on sweet oxygen for the first time in more than a minute. Zangief stood behind Naruto and yelled, "For Mother Russia!" He then knelt down and grabbed Naruto by the back of the waist. He then merged his body back and slammed Naruto's back, head, and neck into the ground, shouting, "Ultimate!" He then picked Naruto back up and slammed his back down across his knee, shouting, "Atomic!" He then threw Naruto into the air and jumped with him, catching him, and drove him into the ground with a makeshift spinning piledriver, shouting, "Buster!" Oh my goodness! What a terrible display of chain grappling, on the unforgiving concrete floor to boot. I think we've found our winner. There's no way that our young friend is still conscious. There's just no way. Naruto, Naruto-san. People in the stands cheered loudly as Zangief got up, laying Naruto's body face down in a more natural position than where it had been before. This made Sakura and Karen's frantic screams from the stands almost impossible to hear. He smiled happily as he looked at the crowd and raised his hands in victory. He didn't see Naruto move at all. That last attack was cotton soft. One day, Zangief heard Naruto's weak voice and went over to see him. He was still lying down in the same way he was before, eyes closed and all. He laughed at Naruto's attempts to make fun of him and said, "I hear your mouth moving, little man, but I don't see you getting back up to prove it." In other words, he was huge. Naruto's body started to twitch, and he said, "Fine." But he didn't get up. Zangief laughed badly at his expense. A few loud people in the crowd told Naruto to stop, which made Zangief laugh even harder. "Don't laugh at me," he said, moving around but not even starting to stand up. Zangief made fun of Naruto by lowering himself to his level and yelling, "Stay down," right into his ear. "You have the heart of a tiger, but the body of a deer, broken by a real tiger. Apparently steroids shrink your brain as much as they shrink your balls because I already told you that your last move was soft." Zangief kicked Naruto in the body, knocking him to the ground. To Zangief's surprise, Naruto got up faster this time, leaving marks on his body and clothes from the fight. Naruto almost fell back down again when he got to his feet, but he laughed and then flipped Zangief off with both hands. Zangief sneered and charged at Naruto, vowing to grab the teenager who didn't seem to be able to defend himself and twist him into a pretzel for his rude words and actions. "I'll crush you and throw you into the wind." Naruto's hands formed hand seals as he began to make them again after flipping the double bird. "Crush this," he mumbled, taking deep breaths as the seals continued. Instead of stopping Naruto's energy attack, Zangief charged up his glowing green hand again. But Naruto kept charging it anyway. He stopped his hand seals on the tiger seal and let out a blue glow in the back of his throat. Cho Ikataihao Chakra Breath Cannon. After blocking a normal projectile attack, Zangief was hit by a steady wave of millions of thin, spraying chakra needles from Naruto's mouth. These needles seemed to stab into him as they hit his body and then disappeared into the air. There was no way that this attack could hit everything, but it didn't matter much because Zangief was right in front of Naruto and took the whole thing. The sudden and shocking feeling of being hit with raw chakra straight from Naruto's throat made Zangief scream until he could no longer speak. He let the attack fade when he ran out of breath. Zangief's front was covered in blood, but it wasn't from wounds because none of his pores had been opened. He stood tall for a moment, his face still twisted into a yell, until he fell backwards and hit the ground like a redwood tree. Naruto did nothing but stand there, pant, and look at the Russian superstar who had been knocked out. He hoped that the superstar wouldn't act like something from those scary zombie movies that Sakura loved to watch all the time. There seemed to be a long time between when enough was enough and when the announcer called it. He gave Zangief even more time than he had planned to give Naruto to get back up, but he couldn't and wouldn't wait any longer. Can you say upset? Like I said, it was David versus Goliath, and that amazing blast of ki from the little blonde guy was the slingshot and stone that felled the giant. Ladies and gentlemen, your winner and moving on to the final round of the C9 Corporation Grand Ace Fighting Tournament is Uzumaki Naruto. The crowd roared again, this time because of the brutal ending to the match that left both fighters bloody and bruised. Naruto didn't even bother to play to the crowd or raise his hands to show that he won. He didn't really feel like a winner. Naruto knelt down in front of the unconscious Zangief and stared at him. He then frowned and blinking said, "Okay, you can't shake my hand, but I'll shake yours." He then grabbed Zangief's closest hand and gave it a hearty shake before standing back up and limping off. Kami. Do I even have enough for the finals? He asked no one in particular as he barely reached the barrier and sat down against it. He didn't care that fans were patting him on the shoulder and ruffling his sweaty, dirty, and bloody hair. Hurry up and heal me, you stupid fox. I'm gonna need it, he said under his breath. In the rows, as Naruto finished his fight with Zangief, Vega fixed his cold eyes on him. His flock of beautiful female friends were all around him and trying to get his attention, but it didn't matter to him. No matter where he went in the world, he could find more beautiful women. No, he was thinking about who won the last deathmatch. He turned down his offer without even listening to him. That's so rude. Vega's pride would not let that insult stand. So rude of that ugly peasant to make fun of him and stare at him in the lobby with those mean eyes. Eyes. Every eye was to be on him with love, admiration, and jealousy. All of that might have been okay if he had just taken the job offer. He could be used for something else if he wouldn't work. He had blood that could calm Vega down. In Vega's mind, seeing the boy's eyes lose their life would be the same as hiring him. It was clear that if someone wasn't with Shadaloo, they were against them. Vega got up and walked somewhere else after thinking about that. He had to see someone and make plans with someone else. It didn't matter to him what the last round was. It didn't matter who won. Uzumaki Naruto would have to pay for his mistakes by the end of the night, no matter what. A tiny nap. After being kicked about by the talking Russian bear Zangief and dragging out a victory at the price of great bodily harm and a lot of chakra in the form of his high-powered ninjutsu, that was all Naruto wanted. That was a reasonable want, to sleep. He would be good as long as someone kicked him awake in time for the last round following the second interval. Though, his waking manner was a little more pleasant than that. Naruto lay flat on his back and opened his eyes widely. Karen seemed to lean slightly over him, a slightly worried frown on her face that was somewhat shaded from his view due to the backlight from above shadowing her features. Though he expected his eyes to be greeted with the harsh glare of the arena lights digging right into his corneas, he was shielded from being blinded by the lights. Naruto made it out, wincing to the degree she couldn't tell his eyes had been open for a while. Moment later he realized he was not lying flat on the ground. She sat in Caesar on the combat floor, wiping the blood and grime off his face with a damp rag. What's up? His head was in her lap. She did so under the pretense that he was unconscious and would not be roused from his cataleptic state without major stimulation first. Karen had volunteered to clean Naruto's wounds while Shibazaki went off to get supplies to help in his quick recovery for the next round, and Ishizaki did what he could on the spot to fix him up as it was. But in this sense Naruto's own endurance was much underappreciated. Now he was waking and staring inquisitively at Karen with blue eyes, blinking perplexingly about exactly why he was in her lap. Still, it was far softer than the floor. This was embarrassing, at least as far as the shockingly wealthy girl herself was worried about. Apart from her dense character, she knew exactly what it looked like with her cradling of his head on her lap even if he didn't, and she assumed he did. She was simply safeguarding her investment. She did not need him drawing hasty judgments. Nothing more. She could have done a better job of it, though, since she dropped his head from its position on her thighs when she discovered he was awake, allowing it to smash against the concrete with a rag wrapped over his face. Whoops. Under the damp rag, ow. Naruto mumbled, not moving from her spot on the ground even though by then Karen had darted to her feet, smoothing her skirt out and playing off both what she had been doing and the fact that she might have rung his bell all over again by accident. Ah, it was nothing, Karen said, recovering some of her boldness upon Naruto's thanks. She certainly wouldn't have pointed it out to him if that were the case, as long as you just so happen to be in fighting shape for the final round. You are able to fight, are you not? It sounded more callous than it actually was intended to be, but she stood by it. Your injuries are rather debilitating. To her astonishment, though, the male blonde stood up and stretched his stiff joints with considerable effort. Yes, it hurt. All hurts. Still, he could stand, walk, and if he could do those things he was battling. Nobody could ever claim that Uzumaki Naruto quit, and they wouldn't now either. After staring at the clear liquid for a moment, Ishizaki held out a little glass for Naruto to take. Naruto simply shrugged and threw the medicine back at the large good-natured man's silent urging, growling and clutching his chest a little as it dropped. That was nasty. It burns too. What was that for? Karen said, you have just taken something of a painkillers. Only instead of making you numb to everything, which would be dangerous for going into a fight, it replaces the pain with a burning feeling akin to muscle rub. How do you feel? Whatever this stuff was, that burning feeling is coating my entire body. I must have been messed up last round. I looked around noticing that the floor was one member of the current Aohara City student entourage short. Where'd Sakura-chan go? Smacking his lips at the bitter taste of the medicine, Naruto randomly touched places on his injured frame. If Sakura-chan doesn't bring it, I'm never letting her forget it. Datbeo. Sakura was way stronger than she thought she was and had shown openly. He had seen. Cross your arms over your chest and turn away from Karen with an upturn of your nose. That evening, he was planning to extract it from her. Injuries be damned. Along with Sakura, arena lobby. Sakura was steadily punching her gloved hand into her adjacent palm, trying to keep in a fighting mood as she knew Naruto would be much like Batsu was. He wouldn't accept anything less than her very best, and if she didn't give him that he would go out of his way to humiliate her for underestimating him. Pacing the halls as the time ticked down before the final round match against Naruto. Underestimating him straight after seeing him defeat Zangief would have been the definition of stupidity regardless of his scars. You're going to ground a rut into that floor if you keep going back and forth like that. Sakura started paying attention to the man who had said as much and grinned slightly at the good-natured sumo wrestler who had been seated with them since the tournament's start. Hello Honda-san. She greeted politely. Is there something you need? Naruto's still down in the ring. I knew, but I came to talk to you. The question need not have even been asked as her face lit up when the name was mentioned. The techniques you use when you fight. They remind me of someone I met not too long ago. Does the name Ryu strike a bell with you? Honda said, startling the small child. Sakura asked before closing the distance between them with enough speed to make the big man step back for some personal space. You saw him? When? Where? He's in Japan. He was almost 1 week ago. Feeling as though a high school girl 1/3 his size was shaking him, Honda said. He came to see if any powerful fighters were competing in this tournament. One in particular, but it wasn't anyone I had heard of. I couldn't fight due of my arms, and with that he didn't think there was a reason to fight in this competition. From Sakura's perspective, that was unfortunate, so he's probably gone off wandering the world again and whatnot. I might know where he is. Once Honda let that slip, a grin across his face at the saucer-eyed look Sakura gave him, but I'm not just going to tell you. The glare she gave him could have frozen hell over, but he just shrugged it off. No, you have to earn the things you want. I'll give you some incentive to do your best against someone that I know is very skilled. If you can defeat your young friend, I'll tell you everything I know, she said, not wanting to beat a handicapped man. That seemed rather unfair. Sakura kept staring and pointed at the wall in the direction she knew the main arena was as. Honda down, if he's standing and ready to go come fight time. What in the world am I going to do to put him down? You saw that last fight. The Zangief guy looked like he snapped Naruto's spine like a twig and he still got back up. I'll tell you what you do. Before you even say it, you haven't been fighting to win. You have been fighting to fight. Taking Uzumaki Naruto-san on for fun is not any way to approach a fight with him. Honda said, setting a very large hand on her much smaller shoulder and fight him to win. Sakura gave him a confused look, but he explained his point of view for her benefit. Sakura murmured, I've been fighting him for years. She said, no matter how good I get I can't beat him. He gets up from everything. Back at the start, his general hand-to-hand technique was sloppy and raw. Sakura could fend him off even if he tried using clones as long as she kept herself from being surrounded. She could never really fell Naruto for good, even as they both helped her create methods to stop the clones. She could never drop him sufficiently to keep him down, no matter how long their spars dragged on for. In terms of the sumo, the response to that was basic. Greater than. It wasn't like she'd broken out her strongest move for everyone to see. How could you know that? She hadn't been sufficiently desperate to tell anyone her ace attack. Naruto had never even seen it during periods when they practiced together. Someone like you have techniques. Powerful techniques. And you use them readily in every fight you have had in this tournament. That means you have something else that you are holding back in case you need it. Well, you need it for this one. Don't hold back. If you do, he will just beat you again. The experienced mammoth of a man nodded sagely. It's the only way you'll keep him down. He offered as the scope of her advice. Honda could be able to provide. That's all I have to say. Nothing left to really add to the point. If she didn't want to listen and take it under consideration, it was her own ethics. But he wished he had followed his own advice when he had fought Naruto. Then, he might not have got his arms broken at the end of that encounter. Sakura watched him go as he did. Honda was really quite tactically sensible. Put him down, keep him down, and don't let him up until you know. Without a shadow of a doubt Naruto is out cold. And since it had to be continuous, the idea of just how much damage that would require made her sick. Running a hand through her short brown hair and softly massaging her scalp, the upset schoolgirl began to slowly make her way back towards the arena. Intermission was almost finished. If Naruto was up and ready for action, she had to return to face him. She entered this tournament to demonstrate her ability as a deserving martial artist, and it is impossible to let such a focus to be disrupted so readily nowadays. Based on Naruto, main arena, Ishizaki asked, are you sure you're all set to go, Uzumaki-san? Packing away the medical supplies used to patch Naruto well enough to get him to the next point he needed to be at, so to speak. I did the best I could, but I'm not a medical professional. Karen, Shibazaki, and Karen had decided to stay in the aisle right next to the guard barricade for an up-close and personal viewing throughout the last round of the tournament. Yeah, it's okay, Naruto said, extending himself past the comfortable limit for most of his limbs to get them used to working with the pain running across his body at the moment. The big man just nodded in thanks. It's definitely better than nothing. Thanks a lot. He would have to walk it off, or in this case fight it off. Shibazaki had really gone to get Karen a seat, which she was now seated in to observe the approaching battle in comfort. Naruto-san, I would hope that you plan on fighting Sakura-san all out. In your condition I would not advise you pulling your punches in this situation. She for sure knew Sakura was not one to be trifled with. She herself did this when she had the upper hand in her battle against her opponent and soon found herself out of commission. I wanted Sakura-chan to go all out. She's strong. Really strong. She might be the second or third toughest woman I've ever met, but she doesn't show it very much. I spared Karen a glance and a grin after hearing her advice. He recalled the first time he guided Sakura in using her chakra. She possessed great power, and he knew something about having great power inside of him. She never went fully armed, blazing, desperado style, though. She constantly battled with too much control, avoiding trying to damage an enemy too much. Too nice for her own benefit. Well, she was scheduled to fight tonight. He was going to force her to do so one way or another. And he had been developing just how he would pull that off over 3 years of study and careful observation of the mannerisms and temperament of his close friend. Having taught him to learn them in order to avoid doing so, she was most likely the only person in the world whose buttons he would know how to press by heart. Sakura was making her way back across the audience down the stairs to return to the ring, and the sound of the cheering and wolf whistling let the Aohara City contingent know. Naruto chose to stare Sakura down as she hopped across the barricade and looked over at him instead of trying to extend his aching body. Sakura waved to the audience that supported her, a hand raised in the air, quite a few people asking her to wed them and so on. Weirdos. At that moment she was not even 16. Fan support was still fan support, and she would have accepted it exactly as it was. The lights came back on, but Sakura and Naruto merely stared at one another before walking straight up to each other. When they got face to face, the people started buzzing, but to their astonishment, they weren't even glaring at each other and angry words weren't shared. Rather, Sakura reached out to shake. Everyone hoped for fireworks to be set off when Naruto firmly shook his head, declining to shake Sakura's hand and putting a frown on her face. But the only thing that came of this was instead of shaking hands they gave each other a hug. "You big idiot," Sakura said, smiling despite the comment. "I'm not gonna shake your hand, Sakura-chan. We're way past shaking hands at this point," he said before separating the hug and backing away from her, his friendly smile then replaced by a serious look. "If you hold back you won't beat me." Sakura nodded, knowing that Naruto had every reason in the world to change gears attitude-wise. "I won't hold back. If you can just promise me that you won't hate me when this is over." Naruto's expression of seriousness changed when he heard Sakura's apparently pleading tone of voice. But now that she had heard it from him personally, it helped her greatly relax. As the two drifted apart and Sakura started gently circling, she felt as though she wanted to release a breath she hadn't even been holding. One another's sizing up was not very long. Not at all necessary, was it? By now they both knew exactly where the other was moving. They could almost play the fight through in their minds and produce exactly same images. And Sakura's first to spring to action set the pictures alive. She was not allowing Naruto to attack first and control the tempo. That would have been stupid. In Naruto's memory, Sakura had never been so forward during their past battles. She went first. Great work. And so the two participated in their oh-so-familiar dance, which had been much polished hardy by virtue of their years of working together. Naruto looked for good enough openings to launch slick knockout attacks. He was not one for combinations. He would dodge what he could and block what he couldn't, storing the damage until he could rightfully respond at that point in time. Sakura had great agility and flexibility. She was frighteningly fast over short distances and difficult to avoid since she would just jump straight back into your personal and start the whole process over again before leaping out of an opponent's attack range, so forcing them to miss any chance at retribution. Like oil and water whirling around one another, and the struggle resembled what it was. Sakura would use that since her hands moved faster than Naruto's, the first action was moving too close for Naruto's taijutsu to be easily effective. She then started trying to strike away at Naruto's stomach rapidly, but Naruto had his arms crossed over his torso to dull the impact before suddenly shoving Sakura back enough to launch a stiff front kick aimed at her face. Sakura went with the flow of Naruto's shove, knowing that his retribution would be direct, and bent herself back into a back handspring that allowed her to cleanly avoid Naruto's kick and lash out with her own. Sakura proved her elusive talents though. Naruto sensed the toe of one of her shoes lightly brushing his nose, indicating the proximity of her kick to home. Still, this did not stop Naruto from sprinting forward trying to flip the tide. Sakura knew how to handle better than any of his other techniques. Thus he was not going to follow his one habitual pattern that he knew without a doubt. Attempting what he naturally wanted to try would just be a waste of chakra, and in a fight with someone that had more than enough ki to spare, stamina would not be a deciding factor tonight. Sakura pushed it to the side and Naruto struck forward with a straight right hand he knew Sakura would parry. She did not let him down. Naruto spun around with the direction Sakura had pushed his hand and delivered a hard spinning back kick to her stomach, knocking her back. He had been ready for this. Rasengan spiraling sphere, Hadoken surge fist. The two strikes cancelled one another out and pushed each fighter back to a standoff with smoke filling between them where their attacks collided. Sakura just watched where the two had met earlier with their opposing energy moves and realized she had stumbled back far more than Naruto had. There was more enduring power behind his Rasengan. Her Hadoken had enough power from its initial blast to neutralize Naruto even if it hadn't had time to fly very far from its source. Any more distant, he would have simply destroyed the ever weaker Hadoken projectile and continued forward. It could not have held him back. Sakura said, "You actually used that on me," with a modicum of incredulity. "You've never used that on me, even if I told you to try it." She wasn't angry, she was just startled really. Naruto had insisted on never releasing the Rasengan in a spar. He never let it even approach touching her once in 3 years. This was so because Rasengan was not a technique you intended to apply to someone you were supposed to see tomorrow. Rasengan could at least jumble one's internal organs all around if struck in the wrong place. He would have never used that one on her, except for right now. This was so since he had already decided that this fight would be serious. If anything, it was merely evidence Sakura should have better bring her A game or else. "This is different," Naruto said, still in his informal ready stance, "so deal with it or get beat. I told you I wouldn't get mad no matter how you tried to win this fight. Well, that better go both ways." Taking advantage of the lull in the action, Naruto dashed at Sakura and jumped into the air, forcing her to prepare to intercept him in her own way. Sakura swiftly ran and launched her spinning uppercut, tailored to take opponent down out of the air, but much to her chagrin, Naruto created a cage bunshin in midair that shoved him out of the way and took the hit in her stead. Just as his clone was vanquished, Naruto dropped on the ground and caught Sakura in the rear with a hard-hitting charging punch. Sakura knew how to fall, of course, and instead of face planting on the ground she rolled forward and turned to face Naruto once more, neglecting the throbbing back pain from the forceful attack. Naruto was still fixed grimacing at Sakura, his offending hand still extended from the punch. Long ago, he had figured out just how to offset her Shaoken in such a situation. "Come on, Sakura-chan. Don't make me do what I planned on doing. For both of our sakes." It was simply bad form to use the attack like that when they had been in that scenario countless times before. Sakura stood back and immediately fired a flashing blue and purple energy ball from her hands at Naruto with shocking speed, Hadoken Surge Fist. As mentioned and made fun of regularly by Naruto, Sakura's stronger Hadoken attacks lacked much range for all of the power she pumped into them, but her ones with range were far faster as they sacrificed force and accuracy. Sakura closed the distance with that one. It missed him but came close enough to grab his complete attention. Naruto turned his eyes back to her with a quickness that revealed he had been played with a feint. She used a crappily fired Hadoken as a diversion, so transforming a weakness into a strength. Sneaky wench. But because Sakura was so near he could see the smile on her face from knowing she got him, Naruto started to panic. When Naruto panicked, he fell into an old habit doomed to fail against any half-decent fighter. Sakura pushed him straight back into it even though it was a habit he had come near to breaking time and time again since it did more harm than benefit. Her knowledge of him was this level. And she was the last exactly to turn to this habit against. Cage Bunshin no Jutsu Shadow Clone Jutsu. Though this didn't stop Sakura in the least, Naruto used a wall of more than a dozen clones to create distance between himself and Sakura. A good tap would destroy a clone. She didn't even have to give all of her attention and force behind it. Naruto used empty bodies to overwhelm individuals and help him with his more advanced techniques. More like mob strategies, they would hardly exhibit uniqueness in the heat of battle. Well, hell, she could beat that. Sakura immediately launched her next movement to fend off the simultaneous attack from 4 more jumping at her directly. Shunpukyaku Twirling Gale Leg. Spinning like a cyclone, Sakura kicked the attacking clones into smoke before immediately backpedaling for the other several clones. She broke her way through one clone without missing a beat or being taken back from seeing them all. Her approach for handling Naruto's clones was straightforward in technique. It simply took experience to implement. Much experience. All she needed was constant retreat. Just running and running and running. Openings would show herself as the clones rapidly outmatched her 1 or 2 at a time and progressively caught up to her. Actually, avoiding clones was easier the more clones he used. They would crowd around, continually get in each other's way, and help her to rapidly pick them off. They couldn't take a beating, so it wasn't as like they were the actual Naruto either. She would inflict even on their arms, so hurting them even if they raised their arms to block. This would cause them to lose their arms. It was rather large as well. Sakura shrieked, shook her hands, dropped the animal to the ground as it hopped away from the shouting girl. And she would keep doing such until she heard a very calm voice from behind her that was rather familiar. It was a toad really. Sakura stopped screaming and turned her head and neck behind her to see Naruto bent behind her with his hands clasped together and his middle and index fingers extended straight out as if in a hand seal aimed right at her rear side. Damn it, she had lost view of the original, most dangerous Naruto of all. The hand seals for Naruto were lethal. Sakura knew full well that if he was carrying a single one he had her dead to rights and there was nothing she could do. Naruto. She managed to get out with a tinge of fear in her voice from the look of melancholy on his face. "I'm sorry, Sakura-chan. I didn't want to do this, but you're not giving me a choice," Naruto said with a sigh before a sharp look of ill intent crossed his features as he rapidly thrust his hands and fingers forward. Konohagakure's secret taijutsu. Senin Garashi 1000 Years of Death. "Wah! Naruto, you dirty, perverted bastard." Sakura was rocketed into the air clear over the barrier into the crowd while Naruto held his kneeling posture from the aftermath of the attack like a rock star. There is no need to specify exactly where exactly Naruto's attack hit home at, either from the sheer force at which he poked her or Sakura's own over-spirited attempt to jump away from Naruto's infringement of her personal female rights. Well, since he had won the rest of them over, from the way the crowd treated him later, he might as well have been one. Perverts. Actually, several people in the front rows were clearly bending to him across it. Still, fan support was what it was and he would have accepted it as such. Karen was terribly red-faced and conflicted on the inside from her seat. She wanted to laugh since it wasn't every day she actually got to see someone get one over on Kasagano Sakura. Especially considering the extent Naruto just did, and as her agent it was like she herself had done to her toughest rival. Conversely, Naruto's pure boldness in doing such a thing to a woman and in public also. Should he ever treat her in such manner, she would rip off his head. Karen stood up from her personal chair to storm over to the barricade and snapped, "Naruto-san." With the look on her face, she called him over to her and left no place for rejection. She wanted to chew him personally. "What in the world do you call something like? How vulgar." "And I'm gonna pay for it too," Naruto said, feeling like a 5-year-old being chastised by a teacher. He already knew since the audience was scattering away from a path being walked through them like someone was swinging a knife to clear the way. That meant Sakura was up, and she was quite angry. Maybe I should have just groped her instead? Feeling as though he had just set off a tiger from the look on Sakura's face, he turned in the direction where she had just stormed her way back through the throng. In his mind, he had been trying to do his best friend a favor by removing all of her mental obstacles when it came to hurting him. Maybe a possibility existed whereby he had done too good of a job in that regard. Sakura hissed out lowly as Naruto could only see the angry whites of her eyes at that moment. "Uzumaki Naruto. You're a dead man." Her footsteps started to quicken, steadily increasing until she was in an absolute sprint approaching him, where her hands and feet started flying wildly at Naruto in her best attempt to knock his block off. She said nothing else. She didn't slow down a little as Naruto avoided and ducked as best he could, at last being compelled to block a kick that would have struck him in the side of his body using his bicep and forearm. Naturally, he was unable to stop a punch that slammed right into the front of his head and snapped it backwards with just one other arm handy for blocking. "Did you think it was funny?" Sakura asked. With every motion she made the dance that was their respective moves blurring more and more between the two of them. "Be smart about picking what you say next." Naruto wisely did not say a word and focused on defending himself appropriately. His blocks were stopping less and less of Sakura's assaults through. She had more of a bead on punching directly past his guard. She finally chose the direct punches as a means of injuring Naruto with a ferocious flurry aimed at his head and torso instead of even attempting any kicks. Kawarimi no Jutsu had nothing to use in the empty ring, thus Naruto was essentially on his own. She was that fast, something he was unaware of. His legs were perfectly fine even though his last game left him injured. He could still move with the same exact speed that he had before any combat at all. Sakura could, however, equal the speed of Ibuki in close quarters fighting. She had never used that. That was a change. Possibly as she never had to. Sakura would naturally never show blinding speed since unlike Ibuki and Naruto, her method of fighting didn't rely on being faster than everyone else. Nobody in Aohara City worth fighting ever really needed it. She was keeping up with his every movement, but she was more suited for straight fighting and outmatching her foes. Stopping his attempts to flee, Naruto chose to dig in and stand his ground. so meeting Sakura's hand-to-hand attempts to batter him with his own efforts to do the opposite. Sakura was taken aback since Naruto was not one to trade blows with her, but into the fight he charged she had to stop her own careless attack and duck a high kick from the same leg. Naruto threw the kicks such that he could use his hands to create a clone in Sakura's blind spot that charged and slid into her from behind with a dropkick, knocking her down and forward right into a strike from Naruto's knee. Sakura gasped with the abrupt loss of air from her body and staggered back, but she knew that this was a setup for one of Naruto's trademark moves she had to stop before it was too late. She sucked in a big breath. She watched his hands come together to form the cage bunshin required for the coup de grace, but still clutching her ribs, Sakura charged straight forward and knocked the crown of her head into Naruto's face, so stopping him from producing more clones. Naruto spit blood and flew through the air, landing right on his back on the ground. Gah! He sat up to try and stand once more to continue on, but would be met with a nasty wake-up call upon doing so. With the equivalent of getting smacked in the face with a battering ram. Sakura was close enough to fire a multicolored ki blast at Naruto's head as he sat up, forcing him to lie back down flat to avoid it, but as it passed over his face harmlessly, Sakura stood straight over him. Hadouken Surge Fist. She was not planning to be benign, quite naturally. Cringing for the first time in the fight at the shout of agony that came from Naruto's mouth, she lifted one leg and stomped it down firmly on his torso. Naruto coughed out, clutching Sakura's ankle after getting the stomp to the ribs, but finding no strength in his arms to pry her foot off of him. Gah! Right for the ribs. You took long enough. Sakura closed her eyes tightly, then pushed her foot up off of her friend's chest. Hearing him groan once more at the force she pushed off with, and raised her leg high into the air for an axe kick. Quit. She asked him, please. Nothing. Sakura wasn't going to give him the recovery time trying to reason with that obstinate ass. Her mental apology was weak. She kicked Naruto heel first in the chest, her leg down barely able to offset any of the impact. Her hands barely could undo any of the impact. Another scream of suffering came from Naruto, but he gritted his teeth before it grew too strong or too long. Naruto swiftly swiped at the rear of Sakura's knees to knock her down and off of him, but Sakura's balance was perfect and she managed to fall forward, pinning Naruto straight to the ground where she used the force of the fall to headbutt Naruto in the face, so knocking the back of his head into the ground. Sakura scooted up towards Naruto's chest at this point, pinning his arms to the ground with her knees, then grabbed hold of his hair and cocking a fist back. Keep him down. Downplay him. Keep him down. She kept running through in her head like a chant. It was the only thing keeping her from breaking down at seeing a battered and bruised Naruto under her as he was. Naruto. Just quit. Unable to move anything above his midriff where Sakura was pinning him down angrily, Naruto locked eyes with her and sighed as he tried to struggle beneath her. Kami. Sakura had strong legs. I can see up your skirt from here, you know. That was essentially Naruto ignoring her completely. She knew he heard her, and he was answering with his own, do whatever you have to, attitude. Her eyes softened a little and she leaned forward enough to kiss Naruto on the metal plate on his forehead before her features steeled and she started mercilessly pummeling Naruto's skull. Don't hate me, Naruto. I'm sorry. From her seat, Karen turned away from the scene, one of her hands blocking her view. To fight after Zangief wrecked him was too much for him to ask of. It was amazing just seeing him stand up and move about following the last round. Sakura wasn't even allowing him the opportunity to get back on, though. If only he were fresh, she wasn't going to stop until he went limp. Sakura-san is far more healthily than he is. Back in the ring, the punches kept thudding off of Naruto's head, but his eyes never lost their focus. Come on, Sakura-chan, give me some daylight here, he thought in between having his brains scrambled with hit after hit. Only one opening. He just needed that. A punch hit the rear of his head once more as he considered this and tried to wriggle his way free. By now he could see his face was a mess without consulting a mirror. Every shot he took that turned his head from side to side tightened his teeth. An evil bastard that knew their stuff for sure told Sakura to beat the stuffing out of him like this to win. As Naruto struggled harder and harder, his vision began to swim until he passed out. It had been a long day. He was hurting all over to start with. His head was being tenderized by a pair of quite forceful fists. Sakura at this point had closed her eyes and kept pounding. She could sense him bucking and attempting to twist himself free like a pinned-down wolf. Thus he was still conscious. Her eyes closed, though, she missed seeing Naruto's canines get sharper as he grit his teeth. Nor could she see his eyes start to turn red or his whisker marks darkening and deepening. Naruto screamed, Sakura-chan, get off!" as orange chakra burst from his body and he rolled them both over in a show of overwhelming strength before jumping back away from Sakura to get space. Sakura, thrown back onto her butt, got back up right away and formed her fists, unconcerned about Naruto getting back up. But what alarmed her once she turned back to look at him once more, apart from his clear cosmetic transformation, Naruto's facial scars were rapidly healing right in front of her eyes. Her gasp at Naruto's ferocious and overwhelming form was loud. "Naruto? What's this? Just keep on." Sakura retreated at the gravel voice and the authoritative order, but she went on alert when Naruto moved faster than she had seen him do throughout their whole time together. He returned right in front of her and instead of punching her, he swiped her, which was just inhuman. She jumped back, then he cut the bottom of her top off to expose a sizable portion of her naked torso. His nails had developed to be like those of a beast, dangerously sharp. He couldn't be let to approach that near once more. Hadouken Surge Fist. Naruto ran forward and swatted Sakura's blast away like a volleyball with just his bare hands. She had to block a punch squarely at her body, thus she had no time to even drop her jaw in shock. She got her arms up to defend herself, but the one punch from Naruto knocked her meters away and off balance as if she weighed nothing. It was dumb. Naruto exuded strength. Quite robust. He could heft a 220-pound man a good distance with a kick. She had seen him pull a 300-plus-pound man to the ground and cause her to cry like a girl. But the way he had just punched her, if she hadn't braced her arms against her body he would have broken her forearms. Is this the actual strength of Naruto? Being Naruto felt too furious for me. It felt hardly like him at all. That power floating off his body could not be his. She had felt his energy signature before. When she was learning her skills with it, he had run it through her body to provide her the sensation of ki or chakra. The absolute strength of Naruto felt kind, safe, and soothing. This felt gloom. Naruto, what is this? Before stopping and understanding she was afraid, Naruto got ready for another attack. Terrified of him, looking at his hands, he noticed his toughened and sharpened nails and focused on the orange aura around him. What? Years ago, I hadn't done this. Turn it off already, dumb fox. Sakura-chan wasn't going to kill me. Kyuubi's justification for handing him its chakra was at best meager. Sakura wasn't Sasuke. Not nearly close. She would never kill him, even by mistake. Even if she was furious with him for past, turn it off before I hurt her for real. I cannot fight her with this without killing her. The Kyuubi answered cynically, too bad. Don't you remember what you said to me when we first spoke years ago? That I owed you, as it were? Well, consider this payment for time past. Oh, that nasty, vengeful bastard. Was this due to his consistent ignoring of it over all those years? If all that said when Naruto entered his head to visit just so happened to be the demon alerting Naruto that this planet might be taken over? He was not megalomaniac or despot. As the Kyuubi's chakra continued to run through Naruto's body, his breathing accelerated ever faster. He had the choices to either see screw it to both plans that were lose-lose and fight down the Kyuubi's influence before he was forced to do either of the previous options or quit and maim his closest friend for a stupid tournament. Stop giving me chakra, darn it, Naruto yelled in his head. Kyuubi laughed at Naruto's vacant threat, or you'll what? He would pay for it somehow if he intended to try anything that needed him to get near to the seal he would pay for. Fine. Naruto eventually came to see that, realistically, he had nothing he could do to the construct of the devilish chakra. You want to know what I'll do? Naruto began to concentrate and channel more and more of his chakra until instead of a layer of orange chakra there was a tower of it merely piling off his body. Sakura had to leap back as Naruto's chakra started to lick out dangerously, even leaving a lash in the concrete floor where it struck with some force. What is this? She couldn't beat that. She knew Naruto wanted her to fight him for actual combat. Once she cooled off, she realized that this was the only reason Naruto had applied that nasty technique on her from past. He would never have behaved in such manner without a cause. She could not even get near to him safely, though, even with her best effort. Naruto's will to be calm was attempting to offset the Kyuubi's chakra and its influence to do the exact reverse. Realizing he wouldn't be able to burn off all the chakra in him and that it was foolish to even try initially, his breathing started to slow and taper. Fighting it down would thus only be feasible by self-calming. The orange aura began to shrink, his physical traits became normal, and the stifling sensation in the building vanished to nothing as the audience as a whole released breath they were unaware they had been holding. "Sorry about that, Sakura-chan. I'm good now." Naruto was clearly windy from shoving the intense chakra back inside his body, but he still spared Sakura a grin to let her know this was not going to happen again. "Naruto, what was that? You've never done that before," Sakura said, clearly still traumatized by Naruto's unconscious killing intent while he had been in that form. "Are you alright?" Sakura stood in her fighting posture in case this was Naruto attempting a sneak attack on her. No, not at all he was. However, if he was still standing, he had more to offer, and if he had it, he would be using it. At Naruto's side, a clone materialized and the two opened one arm between them to alert Sakura. "Naruto," she cautioned, gesturing her hands to get ready to charge her ki up in a Hadoken. She said, "A Rasengan isn't going to stop this one," as the energy in her hand started shining through her fingers, like an old western standoff at high noon. "Yeah? Well, a Hadoken isn't going to stop this one. So let's find out," he said as Naruto and his clone were shaping their own chakra between their hands. He and his clone ran forward at Sakura as a larger than hitherto seen Rasengan came into clear view. It resembled a Rasengan encased in a more expansive shell, Odama Rasengan Great Ball Rasengan. Sakura inhaled deeply then started her own attack in reply. Bigger, stronger Rasengan or not, she had a blazing Hadoken ready for him. Shinku Tengu Hadoken Vacuum Heavenly Command Surge Fist. A blast like a cannon shot fired from Sakura's hands twice the size of her own body at Naruto's approaching Odama Rasengan. As Naruto and his clone drove headlong into the attack and pushed their jutsu forward, they yelled. Extra time needed to build the power for the moves, far more than the original form of the attacks, and since they were evenly matched like their earlier Rasengan, Hadoken Clash, they once again exploded much as they had been built under similar pretenses. This time the blast was absolutely deafening and felt clearly. Directly from the epicenter of the explosion, a blast of strong wind and debris swept outward over most of the front rows. The only thing anyone could do was wait until the dust raised towards the ceiling before learning what happened. Karen stood out of her seat and right at the barricade. "What happened? It is too thick to see through," coughing and shielding her eyes from the dust and debris. The audience gasped in shock as the scene emerged slowly from the blast's point of view as the dust started to float off. Though neither Naruto nor Sakura were inside of a crater that sat where they met. Rather, Sakura sat on one side of the ring, limp and with the barricade almost destroyed from her body's impact against it. On the other direct side from Sakura, Naruto had paid the price for being closer to the point of the two attacks detonating. Driven through a small trench bored out by his own jutsu's volatility, he landed squarely on his side's barricade and lay at the feet of the front row viewers equally as unresponsive as Sakura. Though neither of them moved an inch from where their bodies rested, the whole building was silent as everyone waited for one of them to move and stand back up. Neither Uzumaki Naruto or Kasagano Sakura are capable of moving, ladies and gentlemen. This match is declared a draw. We've seen something very special today, now let's get those kids some medical attention. Kanzuki-sama, Uzumaki-san didn't win, Shibazaki said as he, Ishizaki, and their charge Karen watched the EMTs dash into the ring to tend to Naruto and Sakura on the spot. A draw. One thing Karen could not stand was failure, thus this little relationship between her and the local cracker of skulls had to end. Greater than should he have prevailed today, she would have questioned just what she would have had to do to challenge him should their agreement turn out to be the most well-known fighter in the world. Besides that, she had to know exactly what Naruto did during his battle against Sakura. She had never felt anything quite strong before. She never even did anything with it. Her instincts were telling her to flee, to get away from him. Indeed, he was getting more and more fascinating daily and was stronger still than he let on. She was closer, so she took the initiative to leap over the barricade and walk over to Sakura first. She discovered Sakura loaded on a stretcher trying to retrieve the neck brace placed on her off, much to the dismay of the medical staff. Karen frowned when she got to her side, but helped her take it off. "You should have kept the brace on, Sakura-san. You do not know how hurt you appear to be right now." Sakura said weakly, pausing to lie back down now that the tight and in her view unnecessary neck brace was off of her. Yes, I do. I've never felt this bad in my life. Naruto really messed me up. He earned that win. He didn't win, Karen said, getting the EMTs to turn the stretcher so Sakura could see Naruto getting placed onto his own. Much as Sakura, he was trying to keep something from happening. He was trying to keep from being placed on the stretcher entirely. Apparently, he could stand since he was hobbling over to them at the moment. I don't believe it. He is movable? If she had considered speaking rather than gawked, what would have been her first question on her lips? Once Naruto entered earshot and nearly passed out, he said, "Never again," and kept himself straight by slung against Sakura's gurney. He had his head down as he was too tired to pull it enough to face her. His legs gave back out and he dropped to one knee despite having made it all the way over to her and Karen. "We're never fighting again." "No way. That's not your decision." This, however, caused him to raise his head to fix her inquisitively only for her to place one of her gloved hands atop his head. "You won though. I can't get off of this stupid thing. At least you can still stand up." Karen added a little bit of a fact. It was actually recorded as a draw. Neither of you won this fight. Sakura smiled gently at Naruto sweetly and ruffled his hair with the hand set on his head. "In that case, we're definitely going to fight again, Naruto." She glowed at him. His eyes grew wide with surprise. "Say what now?" Yeah, Sakura-chan," Naruto said, peeling Sakura's weak grip from his cheek and lowly conceding the point that he would still have to defend against challenges from his closest friend in the future. Now that she knew defeating him was possible for her, she would most likely start training the moment she was medically cleared. "If you see Batsu first, make fun of him for losing before I did for me." With that, he plopped down on the ground sitting cross-legged as Sakura was escorted out of the arena. Karen stood next to him observing her rival being hauled away and tried to boost her own training if Sakura could fight that effectively right now. Clearly, they had quite different points of view. Still, she had something more vital right now sitting by her legs. That orange power was amazing, but... So the tournament is done. I believe the prize money will be split between you and Sakura-san, and I guess you have performed well enough that I will recompense you as well," Karen said with a small smile, knowing she would gain favor with her interesting fellow blonde for paying him even more money. "So tell me, what are you thinking now?" "That I should have stayed on that stretcher and waited to see Sakura-chan at the hospital." Thump. Karen let out a moan since she didn't even have to turn to the side to find that Naruto had dropped to the ground. Stubborn ass. And what ultimately did any of that prove to anyone there? Well, since everyone in their happy little party seemed to be headed toward the hospital, it was probably best that she walked Sakura and Naruto there. First Batsu, then the other two. "Okay. Uzumaki-san is unconscious again. The paramedics can load him up into an ambulance before he awakens now." Some later, Tokyo, Japan, nearest hospital. One person seated on a rooftop nearby in the shadow of the adjacent hospital noticed a pair of ambulances pulling into emergency room parking. He had been there ever since the semifinal. He just knew that somehow his target would wind up there. A phone vibrated, then pulled out to be positioned under the man's head. "Yes? Vega-san, the competition is over. Uzumaki Naruto and Kasagano Sakura contested the last round to a draw. I don't understand why you couldn't stay until the end of the tournament, but just as you have asked, I have informed you the end results." "Thank you, Director-san," Vega said in a very friendly and pleasant manner as he still sat swathed in the natural night shadow provided by the moonless night and the proximity of the hospital to his own diminutive building of roost. "I must say, it was a very interesting show before a more personal matter pulled me away. Were there any more unfortunate injuries like the man that the Russian paralyzed?" "No, wonderfully not. Although both of the finalists are in quite rough condition. I was surprised that children could fight so fiercely, especially against one another." Vega ended the conversation and dropped the phone on the roof before standing up and stomping on it to destroy the now useless to him device. "Well, human nature is indeed constantly surprising. And as you said, hopefully those children can get some quick medical attention for themselves. Goodbye and congratulations on a successful show." He was not sporting his noble and sophisticated attire as he emerged from the black shadows. He wore purple and yellow pants with a red sash around his waist, white leggings down around his calves, brown loafers. Something like a matador. While still sporting long light brown hair in a braid down his back. Now he had no shirt, and his chest was clearly tattooed in purple with an upward and around right arm pattern. Still, his left arm displayed the most obvious attachment on his body. Around his bicep he wore a golden bracer. Further down his arm on his hand, he wore a long razor-sharp metal three-bladed claw. He slid a blank white porcelain mask over his face and peered through its eyeholes to see Naruto and Sakura being hauled from the ambulances into the hospital itself. Vega said to himself, "You should have accepted my offer, you little fool. Bison would have loved to have another pawn like you to play about with. And having another ninja-trained assassin around could have been interesting." Vega tightened his weapon around his wrist and hand. Still, this only proves just how crushingly ugly you truly are, my poor unsightly friend. Vega raced toward the hospital building with ridiculous speed, jumping from his own to start easily scaling the side of it towards the rooftop. Because attractive fighters never lose battles.
We'll meet you in the next part. Till then, bye bye.